We'll call the meeting of the Traffic Safety Work Group to order. It is 10:35. First item on the agenda is public comment. Does anyone have any comments for anything that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go right into official business. The first is review of the proposed Lovers Lane, Orkawa Avenue, Monahans Road improvements. This is continued from a bunch of previous meetings. And this is just a standing item to get any updates and comments from the committee. Rob, is there anything new to report on the project?
I'd simply mention that we had a recent meeting, public forum here. The engineers, GPI, attended, and they had a chance.
Oh,
There we go. Much better.
now we're live.
So we had a public forum recently, a couple Thursdays ago, to sort of refresh the topic. The engineers spent the day out in the field looking at, thankfully they came in right after a storm event, so there's some drainage features they could verify and get some field experience to actually see the project on the ground that they've been working with in the office, just based on the plans they had. So they do have a conceptual layout and profile now. They've started to vet some of the drainage issues. And so we had a good working session. I think we're going in the right direction. And as soon as we have more to report, we will.
Sure. And I'm sure the conceptual plan, people can find that on the website. Is that posted yet? Or
it was forwarded to help desk to upload. So
Okay.
we could probably check it before we go just to see if it's up and running.
Sure. Bring this over, and it is a transportation project. Where are we at? Surfside area,
Yep.
roadways. It's not one of these, right?
No. No, so it's not up yet.
Okay. All right.
I will follow up on that today.
Thank you. So we're taking no action on that, but we'll keep this on the agenda for future meetings. Item number 2, review of request for crosswalk on Milk Street Extension to connect 59 Milk Street Extension to the bike path. And this is continued from last month. Is anyone here to speak on this item? Go right ahead. Sorry, the microphone's a little out of place. You can go ahead and rotate that around. You can swing that. There you go.
So my name's Lydia Gullickson. I spoke last meeting. Do you want me to reiterate everything I said last time, or?
Because we have some members here that weren't here listening to go. So if it's not too much trouble.
Yeah, of course. Perfect. So we are requesting a crosswalk between the bike path and 59 Milk Street Extension, which is our observatory. It's located right after a bend in the road, coming from one direction, and then coming from the other direction. It is 25 miles an hour, but a lot of cars are still going quite quickly coming from Hummock Pond Road. So it can be a difficult place to cross. And there is a crosswalk at Wynn Street, which is slightly down the road, right before the curve right there. But unfortunately, if people do cross at Wynn Street, they would have to walk alongside the road with no bike path or sidewalk. And the brush comes right up to the road, and it's right after that curve. So it's not a particularly safe place to walk alongside the road. We do host 2 open nights in the summer a week, running from June to September, and we get upwards of 200 people at each open night. So in a week, that's 400 people. And we do encourage people to walk or bike because we don't have much parking, and we have this new bike path that's conveniently right there. And a lot of people do arrive by foot or by bike. A lot of them are visitors to the island, so they don't have cars anyway. And some of them do also arrive by Uber, which also sometimes will leave them on the other side of the road and leave them to cross. So we are getting a lot of people crossing several nights a week. This past summer, I worked at the front desk at the observatory. and we got a lot of people crossing, including a Boy Scout troop from off island, and they arrived by bike because they also didn't have a car. So that was about 15 Boy Scouts crossing the road on their bikes, which was pretty stressful to watch. And on top of that, we have our interns who go out there nightly during the summer. We have 6 astronomy interns who are there for their undergrad research. And they usually bike out there because it's relatively close to our other facilities. And then we also get several school groups and other scout groups, young, youth groups who come out to the observatory to further their education. It's also difficult to cross sometimes because we don't have any lighting there. And unfortunately, adding additional lighting would take away from the experience of viewing the stars through the telescope. And Nantucket is such a perfect place to be able to see the stars because we don't have that light pollution. So we think a crosswalk would really benefit a lot of people and really create a more safe environment for a lot of visitors and residents of the island.
All right. Thank you for that. And the reason this is back on the agenda is that there was an accommodation that was really not anticipated at the time we were considering this last month that perhaps DPW can clarify, and we can discuss both options if that's all right. Rob, do you want to elaborate on the improvements we would make to the other side of Milk Street?
Well, I guess I was thinking back to for a new crosswalk, and I apologize, I wasn't here at last meeting. I appreciate going through all that. There was some concern before the last meeting, and frankly, I was just surprised. I definitely want to hear from the rest of you as far as the work group goes as to the conclusion that was drawn to add a crosswalk. But my thought was twofold. MUTCD talks about crosswalks in this manner, that crosswalk lines, which is basically just construction of a crosswalk, should not be used indiscriminately. An engineering study should be performed before they are installed at locations away from traffic control signals or an approach controlled by a stop or yield sign. And it goes on from there. So that said, we don't necessarily have, as a work group, a guideline or policy specific to crosswalks. I've done a little bit of research, and there's towns out there that have designed or have implemented policies specific to crosswalk for new crosswalk developments. I would encourage the committee to consider development of such a policy in the future. And then for this one specifically, to encourage coming on the backs of Milk Street just being improved with the introduction of the bike path, the handicap accessible ramps, etc. I think it's challenging to now hear from a private entity looking for a crosswalk when the crosswalk at Wynn Street, a short distance away, could have been located here if a warrant called for it. Could have included some sidewalk on the other side as well. So I think the point is, for these type of projects to develop, that's why public outreach is done when the project is under development. So like we're doing at a lot of the other transportation related projects. So I kind of feel like this is coming too late to the project, as we're, the contractor's demobilized. The warrant for this location, I don't discount the intense use that happens here. And I think that needs to be recognized. I'm not saying, personally, I'm not saying no. I think if there's a situation here, we should try to find a way to resolve it. But I don't think that right now I have enough information to make a decision. I think based on my experience, having two crosswalks this close to one another is definitely not something that is typically warranted, that you would do one or the other. We've heard lots of feedback from locals about the position of or the safety and the position of the one at Wynn Street that was designed into the project. So I'm just that's kind of where I'm at now. Hopefully that kind of makes some sense. I don't know where the committee wants to go from here, but I think before we just say yes to a crosswalk, there needs to be some due diligence here, an engineering study, and I'm not sure right now we have. There's a lot of other transportation projects in the pipeline, and we're funding design efforts there. Without a policy in place, I'm sort of in the dark here.
Okay. I understood this was going back on the agenda because one of the accessibility issue was definitely a legitimate term. There are other warrants that this crosswalk would meet. I think that's why we had a unanimous consent. That one, there was a demand for it. Two, there's not the number of lanes to cross for a pedestrian, which is definitely an engineering consideration. The speed along the roadway was definitely low, so it fit that threshold. But I believe there was the alternative, instead of recutting the path and creating an accessible landing at the location here, which would not have been provided by marking the crosswalk. It is sour. I believe the alternative, and correct me if I'm wrong, was to provide a sidewalk from the existing crosswalk at Wynn Street to the driveway on that side of the road, and that was the alternative to a crosswalk at this location. Is that correct?
That's possible.
Okay.
Certainly. Again, something that needs to be. This is something that from our transportation study efforts. It's not something that we don't pick up and mobilize to start building on Monday. Mm-hmm. This is something that goes into a carefully considered, it's funding, getting into FinCom and Capcom agendas. And so I guess my point is there's a lot to be talked about here, and having a thought through an actual policy to follow is helpful in the decision-making process, so we can get to that point and get projects like this in the pipeline. I feel like and again, we still need to get this in the pipeline, but they need to understand that even a yes means this is going to be following a process that's going to take not months, but years to get to.
Okay. All right. Is there any comment at all from the?
Yes. One other thing that we think would also be very beneficial and very easy and cheap, I guess, would be just like a little pedestrian crossing sign to put in the center of the road, and we can remove it when we're not hosting open nights, just like the 2 nights a week in the summer, similar to what's in front of the school or the Boys and Girls Club, to just have the ability to put that out, just to slow down cars for those 3 hours that we're hosting open nights.
Okay.
That would be.
No, that's something we've considered in the past. I think the concern has been just what you described, putting it out into the road and bringing it back and maintenance of that. Is there any other concerns with if that's done?
That's pretty much it.
Okay.
I'll put out the community sailing does it up in on Walwinnett Road when they have their drop offs in the morning.
Okay. Sure, go ahead.
I'm Jason Leonardo Finger. I'm the MMA's deputy director. It's just, we really need something to slow people down, because even though the speed limit might say 25 in one direction, people are going 40 or 45 miles an hour, and they do it during the day and they do it at night. During the day is terrifying enough. I've almost gotten clipped several times trying to cross, but because they're getting, people follow the bike path, get dumped out at Wynn Street and then have to walk along the side, and then they're coming along that curve. You can't, where the observatory is, you can't see people from either direction when you're driving. But then if you add that excessive speed, because they're definitely going over the speed limit, it's terrifying. What the MMA fears is that at some point somebody is going to get killed because somebody is going too fast. And again, Wynn Street is not advantageous to the observatory. And while we have been promoting people to use the bikes, we're really happy that people are walking and biking instead. A lot more people were doing it. And at some point, like I just said, somebody's going to get hit. And it's not just going to be on us, it's going to be on the town that we've tried to do something and we don't have anything. So
Okay.
even if we could just have those cones, and we have to open up every night, back and forth. So those would be something that would be put aside, dragged out, put back in, but we need something to try and let people know that there are people crossing. I mean, the experience of Lydia sitting there and watching the Boy Scouts cross was terrifying.
Yeah.
So people just don't stop.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if was MMA vocal during the design process for Milk Street improvements?
We had some issues with the movement of the poles, so we were vocal about that. We did not know that there was a crosswalk, or at least I didn't know there was a crosswalk going in at Wynn. And we also didn't know that the bike path was going to increase the amount of people who were coming that way to use the observatory.
Sure.
We didn't know it was going to be
Unintended.
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
No, it is a
Absolutely.
good thing,
Actually,
but it's just causing
Sure.
us to have a lot of stress now because we're really afraid somebody's going to get hit.
Sure.
totally hear you. It's killing me. I haven't been up there yet. I'm trying to get up there. I keep saying one of these
We've
open
missed it.
nights.
We're also open a couple nights a week, a couple nights a month in the off season too. But that's fewer people. But the summer is a lot. I mean, that's 400 or 500 people a week. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
What do you think? Temporary measures until
I'd say
they
temporary.
They put up
Yes,
there and maintain it until we can get something designed.
probably. Just put out some little hand sign or the little bollards.
All right, what do you think?
I'm wondering if there could be a combination solution. I know the size of the lot is very limited. Have you, and I know there's some grade issues there as well, but is it possible, have you considered some expansion or improvements to your driveway and parking area and perhaps facilitating an on-site drop-off spot? You've got on-site people that are coordinating things as well.
We actually are in the process of working to expand our deck. We have HDC approval for that. I'm currently working on the building permit, but the terrain there is very steep.
Right.
So the lot is only 8,000 square feet, and we don't really want to just make it into a giant parking lot. We don't think that's very friendly. But also, again, we're trying to encourage people not to use their cars. The town did give us that strip that's to the left. I don't know if you see, there's like a little strip along the road there that they made a small area of clearing so that people could park along there and also drop people off. It probably holds about 6 cars. But the issue is with people coming a different direction. And also people who are visitors here don't necessarily have cars, but also don't realize parking. But then again, when you drive into that area, because it's on the curve, it's very hard to bring your car back out. Even us going in and out ourselves to drop things off or whatever, it's quite terrifying. And that causes a whole other issue.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're not going to be able to accommodate 150 cars for people to come and observe.
No, but I think the thought too is if a sidewalk gets introduced on that side all the way back to Wynn Street,
Sure.
that's going to have the effect of providing additional sight distance for the drivers coming up Wynn to be able to, because that the inside of the curve
what was already done to the left side of the observatory, which is just basically like a little bit of a gravel
Cut back.
pull off.
Yeah.
That would be fine. But again, it's not going to stop unless there's like a sign that says cross here at Wynn Street, and people are still going to take their bicycles because they're looking at their phones, so they're not going to see that. They're going to go, my phone brings me to the observatory, I cross directly in front of the observatory. I can't stop
Sure.
people from doing stuff like that.
Understood.
And Uber
I guess
dropping them off or things like that. So just the idea with the crosswalk was more about slowing people down. But even if we could we would appreciate a sidewalk, but this is something that's immediate. Like this summer, I'm terrified somebody's going to get hit. So if we could have some kind of cones that we could put out, as Lydia said, that are by the high school, that are by the Boys and Girls Club, that are at the hospital, that get dragged out for the time and then put back, it would slow people down and also give people a chance to cross.
So I'd be happy to make the motion to allow for MMA to be able to purchase and employ and take these back out at the end of the event. that's
Okay.
definitely something that we would support and we have
Okay.
supported. In the longer term, I think, Wynn Street, Mike would know better about the plans to improve Wynn Street. But there's been some movement to improve sight distance on the corner already with the existing crosswalk there. I think what I'm hearing tonight is a potential to short term maybe do a little bit more vegetation removal heading up your way on Wynn Street to provide some additional sight distance through that corner for people on that shoulder. And then longer term,
You'd have to make that no parking because if cars park there, they'd defeat the purpose.
I understand that, but I guess my point would be to open it up a little bit so people can see, but with more of a longer term analysis of extending sidewalk up to the driveway there. Again, this is, a longer term investment in something that could have been involved, but I think sounds like it's something that has been a beneficial circumstance that's come from the bike path coming.
Yes, it has.
So, Rob, just to be clear, you said the purchase and maintenance of a median crossing signage, and was there a second component to that, or was that the motion?
Just to support MMA's purchase and deployment and then removal of.
Just to maintain it, you just keep it. Okay.
Yep.
Um,
I don't know what are those signs called specifically.
just median crossing sign. Right?
Yeah, just crossing signs or something.
I'm assuming it's exactly what's in front of the hospital, Vesper, and front of the schools and Boys and Girls. I'm
We'll
assuming
find
it's
something that's
exactly.
exact the same or as much as we can find.
It necessarily doesn't say school crossing, but
Right. Just something that says caution pedestrians. And you could put one at each end of the, kind of your up the road a little bit from each side of where they generally cross.
Okay.
And
Not
then,
in the middle or not?
well, you could put one there too. I'd get several, and give it kind of a little stretch
Okay.
that people can cross over. And then at the maybe a half hour, an hour before your scheduled start time, put them out. And then after everybody's gone,
Yep.
pull them back in.
Okay.
all right. Is that clear for the minutes?
Motion to allow MMA to purchase and maintain pedestrian crossing signage and support the employment and removal of the signs. Is that right?
Is your motion? Is there a second?
Second it.
All those in favor say aye.
I
All right, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
All right, item number 3, review request for a crosswalk on South Shore Road at South Pasture Lane.
I'll just mention to those folks as they are leaving, David did reach out to me in an email. I did respond to him late last night. If he wants to meet further about the longer term solution, I'm happy to make some time for him. Thank you.
Thank you for that. In your packet is a request for a crosswalk. Looks to be on the south side of the intersection of South Shore Road and South Pasture Lane. Is there any comments on, you're here to speak on the request?
I put the request in. It was more.
And your name for the minutes, please.
Michael Hajar, resident at 2 South Pasture Lane.
Okay.
I really didn't know what the process was. It was more asking Erica, how do we go about requesting the crosswalk? And she just went ahead and put it to the meeting. So I guess I'm here just to see what's involved, if it's possible,
Okay.
etc.
All right. Any questions on the request?
Do we need a policy?
I will say that the crossing would land. There's a lot of puddling.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it this morning. A lot of puddling that it would
Yeah,
land
there
into.
is. And I didn't know if we needed a sidewalk for it to, or if it could just go right on to South Pasture Lane from the bike path or.
I think as it's shown is exactly where you would want it.
Yeah.
But I'll take comments from the rest of the committee on that. Just the only concern I had was just the drainage on the edge of the road.
as you could see in that email, we do have parents that walk to the school, or we have a little daycare in there. And they come up from Abrams Quarry and from Sachem's Path. Some of them walk in. So it's more just for their safety as they're crossing South Shore Road.
Okay.
It's not nearly the volume that MMA has or the speed at which people travel on Hummock Pond Road, but it was a measure we were looking to see if we could do.
The school there, I can't remember what the name of it
Exploration
is.
Station.
Yes. What's it? Who
It's
are
a daycare preschool.
Okay. For what age group?
2.9 to 5, and then there's an after school program.
Okay. I'm just curious about whether the children walk there or not.
Well, moms will walk with them.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've seen a stroller, but they're not really using strollers at that point. Some of them ride their bikes.
Okay. Good.
I have,
Go ahead, Art.
one concern that I have about crosswalks, and I see slightly different than the last one because of a particular facility with a high demand, is that if we put a crosswalk at every intersecting street, then the next neighborhood or the next neighborhood, the next neighborhood, then this entire road, will have crosswalks. And one of the other things, and I don't see, it's a somewhat limited neighborhood. Now, I appreciate wanting to provide safe passage, but there's also people could still cross a road and they just have to do it safely. It doesn't have to happen at a crosswalk. And I sometimes fear too that a crosswalk may give a false sense of security on a road such as this. So I think I'm not sure that I would support this.
I'd put it to you this way. If we were to follow some other town's policy, which is in keeping with MUTCD's standard engineering study protocols, it's quite likely that what you would find is exactly what Art was talking about, that the warrant for such a mid-block crosswalk is probably not warranted.
Okay.
But
Well, this would be an intersection. In under state law, every intersecting road has a crosswalk.
Yeah, they're automatic crosswalks.
Automatic.
Yep,
Whether it's marked or not, it's something else.
sure.
I mean, my position is intersections should have crosswalks. That's where they belong, not at the middle of a stretch of road.
The mid blocks are tricky
Yeah.
because there's a lot of people do cross the mid block. My take on this is that because it is an intersecting road, although there isn't a facility along South Pasture Road, like a sidewalk or anything like this, that it probably would be good to market at this location. It's really not a private residence or a commercial establishment mid-block. So I think it meets all the other merits. Is there a motion from the group at all to either take no action or to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Is there a second? I'll second for discussion.
I think, my opinion, we've got it. I live down that area and I see all the people that are walking down that sidewalk in the morning. And there are a lot of children, and I do agree with Art that I think crosswalks give you a false sense of security sometimes, but at the same time, it's not exactly clear that these are intersections sometimes on these roads. And I think that helps delineate the intersection a little bit when you do put some crosswalks in.
Okay.
How close is this to the proposed development?
About halfway between.
The next crosswalk to the north is Sherburne Commons, and that looks to be, I'm going to say 500 feet away from this intersection.
So you really only have 1, 2, 3, probably about 5 locations down South Shore that would use a crosswalk.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, motion is made and seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor for approval, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Others opposed? One opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item number 4, review of Article 71 of the 2019 annual town meeting, bylaw amendment for bicycles and associated town requirements, signs, et cetera, if approved. There is a couple of people, I believe, here to speak on this matter, so I'll give the floor to Harvey Young.
Thank you. Yeah, for the record, Harvey Young. We wanted to bring this article. Thank you for getting us on the agenda. We wanted to bring this to you. Ian Golding proposed the article, but I've been helping him with some details, and we were hoping that we could garner your support for town meeting coming up. The kind of the background, I think both Ian and I are on the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee that reports to the Planning Board, and over the last couple of years, we've often discussed some of what we call frivolous or kind of make no sense stop signs that are on the bike paths that in a lot of places are causing bikes to stop for crossing cars where we think they shouldn't be. A lot of times it seems like that sets up bikes to be in violation, and people are like, oh, the bikes never stop. And so we've been trying to figure out how can we get these stop signs off the bike paths and onto the crossing driveways, crossing ways, and crossing roads, and put the onus on the cars. And often we come up against a pushback, and we've been informed, well, that's the law. And so part of this article is to try to change the law or amend the bylaw, leaning toward making it safer for bicycles and to make it clear to cars that they should be responsible to stop when they're crossing the way, which is the bicycle path. So we're kind of hoping that we could get feedback from your committee and ultimately get your support before this upcoming town meeting.
Thank you, Harvey.
Harvey, other than this one out here, where's this scenario happen?
Well, over the last couple of weeks, Ian and I have actually, gone over every bike path on the island and made some notes as to where there are stop signs that should be added, where there are stop signs that should be removed, where there could be cross-hatching painted. And we have that data in rough form. I don't know if we have that available to start to share with you. One of the big concerns we noticed as we looked around at all the different bike paths is that it's really, there's a lot of, it's not uniform, the way they're signed and the way they're marked. Often it appears like maybe when the bike path was put in was a different style of signage. Maybe the funding that was used required a different kind of signage. But, the Hummock Pond Road bike path is signed differently than the Surfside bike path, which is signed differently than the Fairgrounds Road bike path. There are also, and I think we have information to show where there are stop signs that it appears that maybe residents have put up in front of their driveway to get the bikes to stop. So there's a lot of, we have data on all the different intersections that we would love to try to make available to share with you also.
Well, okay, so that's good, but that doesn't require a bylaw to do, is what I'm getting at. And the concern that I have with the bylaw in some respects is it creates some potential conflicts with state law. And that's impossible for motorists to know that. A motorist, anybody coming to Nantucket to visit, whether you're a summer resident or whatever, isn't going to look up and just to double check what the bylaws are for, bicyclists on Nantucket, because they don't even know those exist for the most part. That's why motor vehicle laws are supposed to be uniform throughout the Commonwealth. That's why they don't allow cities and towns to set their own speed limits, because it would be a nightmare for a motorist going from one town to the next. Is what's the speed limit on this road? The right-of-way laws are the same way. The right-of-way, we're all taught at driver's education who has the right-of-way. And on these paths, it's very clear that people are taught when they get their driver's license, when they take that test, they know that pedestrians have the right-of-way. But when you start putting the language in the way you've kind of done it, it creates some confusion sometimes. When somebody's exiting from a private road or drive, they have to yield to people on the road or the bike path. That would include a bicycle would have to yield to people on the bike path or coming into the road because they're covered by the motor vehicle laws. Now that's different for pedestrians. So that's my confusion looking at all this. And then there's some other things down that you didn't get into, but.
Well, I just in a moment. We clearly understand the confusion, and that's part of why we wanted to come to you guys. In your experience with traffic and safety and laws and that type of thing.
Then the other,
if maybe there's a way that we could amend this or tweak this before town meeting.
Well, the other thing is the designation of what you've called multi-use shared paths.
Right.
What does that really mean? It's very clear out here on Fairgrounds, that's probably a multi-use shared path. It's not so clear on a lot of other sidewalks and a lot of other places that some of us think they're bike paths, some think they're not. Pedestrians wish the bikes would all get off the damn paths,
Right.
Because they're not wide enough. They're not built to that standard. Some are built to that standard. So we looked at this when we were trying to deal with people parking on the bike paths, and how do you designate without creating a major sign pollution problem, which is what we hear the next day after all the signs go up. And that from living here. How do we figure that out? I agree with you 100% on the signage is not consistent, and Ray's a one-man shop over there. Trying to keep up with an avalanche of sign requests, but down on South Shore going into Blueberry, if you're going south, there's a stop sign. If you're coming north, there is no stop sign. Right. Crossing over. Some people say, well, why is there a stop sign at that intersection? Well, it's because the cars coming from off Blueberry can't see because of the vegetation. So yeah, there should be a stop sign going all directions, which there is in essence, except for the one that's missing on the bike path. So somebody going through and finding all those missing signs and coming up with a uniform standard, that's great and something that should happen, but I don't think it takes a bylaw to do that.
Well, I appreciate that input, and I think I'll defer to Ian now if he wants to add anything else.
And Bill, just before you start, Bill, can I just clarify on this? The point on this is that state law says that pedestrians have the right of way in a crosswalk, but bicyclists don't necessarily have the right of way in the crosswalk, and that's what this would institute and create the confusion.
A bicyclist is treated like a motor vehicle in state law. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I just saw one this morning when I was at up by the airport and Old South Road. Bicyclists coming down Old South Road just rode right on through the stop sign, just like it wasn't made tomorrow.
Yeah.
And there was a car that started and had to stop.
Yeah.
And the guy just looked at her and kept going. And I thought, if I had some time, I'd stop you, the bicyclist, and write you a ticket for running that stop sign.
Yeah. They
They have the same obligation as a motorist on any roadway in which they're authorized to operate. Mm-hmm. If there's somebody's on a bike, okay, they may have to stop at an intersection before they cross, where a pedestrian may not, because of the law. So you can't fix that state law with a bylaw that will cause confusion.
Okay. I might follow up with that, but Ian, you had a point that you wanted to make to address.
My name's Ian Golding. I'm on BPAC Concom, and and my notes were taken by John Giorgio and put into this amendment. So John Giorgio felt that this was legal. Not only did John Giorgio feel this was legal, but after reading that letter that came from the police department, I've hired Andrew Fisher from Jason and Fisher, who's a bicyclist attorney specialist, to actually write a rebuttal to what apparently the police department's position is. So, so I think at that level, I'm sort of baffled that there seems to be such a contradiction between definitions of multi-use path, bike path. You go outside the police station here, and you've got arrows pointing to the bike path in this direction, green signs. And yet at the same time, when we go to BPAC, we're told it's a multi-use path, which I find confusing.
We didn't put those up.
Right. So anyway, these, just if you want to have a quick look, this is what Harvey and I have been collating. And it's every driveway, every dirt road, every intersection on the bike paths on the island, every sign. And we hope that will be a help to creating uniformity going forward. When it comes to the data project, I have an email here that was addressed to Jason Bridges and myself from Dr. Frederick Knaft, who's a pulmonologist who's at the hospital every month and who's had a serious bike accident and is a avid cyclist. And he said, I agree that a database needs to be assembled. I think it would be useful to compare a number of bike-related ER visits with police records to understand retrospectively where accidents happen, where all accidents reported by the victim to the police, should the ER report this type of encounter, the seriousness of the accident, bike versus car versus pedestrian, etc. And he says that he would be able to handle this, and he feels that while this is a preliminary idea, from his point of view, with proper type of support, more refined list of questions, data management, etc., I think NCH would not have barriers, and I would be the one to review records via the EMR Epic, do most of the work, and report to the BPAC. He's also involved in a West Hartford BPAC. So this conversation came up yesterday at BPAC, and I said to Kevin Marshall, the last thing we were trying to do was to increase the police workload. And Kevin explained that, for instance, a couple of days earlier, there were four policemen on call, and they were all involved with emergencies. And he said it was different in the summer when, with 25 specials, data collection. He said the data is already there in different data banks. So apparently it's entered, if a bicyclist is hit by a car, it's a different data bank from if a bicyclist hits a pedestrian or whatever. So Rachel Hobart was calling in, and she said that would be something that Remain might be able to put their weight behind. I'm not going to put words into her mouth, and she was just considering it. But obviously, from GoFundMe campaigns to whatever necessary fundraising, I think I don't want to lose sight of the fact, and I hope that this board doesn't lose sight of the fact that we all want it to be safer for bicyclists on the road. When the chief asked for specific examples, if you go down the Pulpers Road right now, on Alter Rock Road, which is a dirt road, there are 2 stop signs for the bike path. There isn't a stop sign for the dirt road. So a couple of years ago when I was biking there, I had a kid blast right by me and who shouted expletives at me because I had the stop sign, right? As far as I'm concerned, that's completely nuts. And the same is true on Almanac Pond Road. And thank you, Rob, for creating more visibility there. That's, again, a private road. And stop signs on the bike path and no stop sign on a private dirt road. And so not only are we looking for uniformity, we're looking for removing what Harvey called nuisance stop signs so that there are fewer stop signs on the bike path. And my guess is that then bicyclists will start to actually obey them more. And I totally agree with you, Chief, about bicyclists disobeying traffic laws, and for someone who tries to obey the traffic laws always, it really makes me grit my teeth when I see it happen, because I know that, it's understandably irritating to a motorist to see a bicyclist disregard the law. So, and, Barnard Valley Road, where Stuart Finkelstein was killed, there's still no stop sign on the approach from the moors on Barnard Valley Road. I mean, I just look at this with complete disbelief. So, and I might add, if you go out there on any given day, you won't see a single bicyclist stop there. They all go through there. Bicyclists, a good example is on Cliff Road, that new bike path where there must be a dozen stop signs in 500 yards. And so I never use it. I just go on the main road, as I'm entitled to do. Would I rather be on, the bike path? I would. But I see absolutely no reason why I should be stopping for every private road as I bike down there. So,
Thank you.
So on the database thing, I don't know. So you have a researcher or somebody who can gather all this data. They can get this data now through the DOT. We don't have to change our computer systems so that they can get the data. It automatically goes from here to the DOT. The problem with it is they got to sort through all the crash reports to find the bicycle ones. And we have a vendor that's a nationwide vendor that provides our records management system. They're not going to modify our records management system for us, just for us. They will for whatever the cost would be. I suppose it'd be pretty significant. But still, it comes down to there's got to be somebody here at the station that deals with that. And I only have one records person, just one. And I don't know that there's time in the day, because I'm not sure. I know how long it takes to go through these accident reports are done for the purpose of gathering statistics. If you've ever seen one, you would look at it and go, I have no idea what just happened reading that report, because it's all about codes and numbers. I can't pick it up and say, well, this is a car bicycle. I have to get a decoding sheet and say, okay, type of vehicle involved. It was a number 1 through 50 something, okay, so that was a bicycle. That's the process that it would take for somebody here to have to do that. So if you have a researcher that can gather the data and then put it into a database, we'll certainly put a link on our website to it. There's no problem with that. And right now we can put a link to all of the accident reports on our website. So that they could even have a little easier access to that. But to ask somebody here at this station to go through and pull that data out is going to be time consuming for somebody to do. And I quite frankly don't have the staff. It isn't going to be a police officer doing it. It's going to be a civilian staff member that we have. And there's only one that deals with records. Maybe we need two for a lot of other reasons than just this. But, that's never been something that's been funded by the select board when we've asked for it in the past. So,
well, thank you, Chief, for that, and we'll certainly go back to BPAC and discuss it and wonder if we can either come up with financing or modify the article accordingly. Because, as I said to Kevin, the last thing you want to do is increase the workload of the police, but at the same time, I think there's a general feeling that it would be very useful to know where these accidents are taking place, how many of them are taking place, so that it can help formulate policy going forward. So yeah. I think that's what we're trying to balance, or that's what I was trying to balance when I suggested it. And, the reason why I brought this article before town in the first place was because of the fatality we had last fall.
Right.
So,
well, fortunately, those types of incidents are far and few between. Where we're going to get mixed up in a lot of things is there's an awful lot of cases where we write a report because a bicycle hit a pedestrian downtown and somebody gets upset about it and they'll call and complain. They didn't get injured. They just were mad because kids were riding on the sidewalk and they hit them. So it goes in that'll fall under that record,
Right.
And that's not done on a state DOT form. That's done on an incident report, which is a narrative type thing. So again, it's not something that on its face would jump right out at somebody as saying, oh, this is one of these incidents that needs to go in a database. Somebody has to read those incident reports and say, okay, that's the information. Now I got to pull the information out and I got to put it into a database. It takes time. We have a lot of cases where people fall off a curb on their bike and get hurt. that kind of thing falls in. It's not related to any kind of right-of-way issue. It's just a bike accident. We have a lot of those. So I think trying to figure it out is, it's not as easy as saying, well, we want just the ones like Finkelstein's accident.
Right.
Because like I said, I can pull those out probably off the top of my head, how many of those have happened.
Right.
But when it comes to all these other ones, there's hundreds. And somebody's got to figure out how to pull all that out of the 30-some thousand reports we do in a year, So not accident reports, but total reports.
I hear you. Well,
And we're willing to work with you on it. I don't think it takes a bylaw to do it. I think it's something that can be done administratively, especially if you've got somebody like that researcher who's willing to do it. And the other part about that, kind of this, a bylaw kind of establishes something that's going to be, it's going to be here and it's going to keep going until somebody either repeals the bylaw or whatever. But if you create something that only works because you got a researcher at the hospital who's there now but may not be there a year from now, and he no longer is able to do it, then what happens? Now that creates a whole different burden on everybody involved. And so I think the best way to do this is for us to sit down with the researcher and you and BPAC and say, well, what can we do here? Because this probably isn't a heavy lift. If it just needs somebody to do it. That's the thing.
got you. Well,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make note of the sign issues and quite frankly the clearance issues. I applaud Ian and Harvey for their efforts, not just recently, but right along the way. We've been working together to identify specific areas that needed updating, and they've put in a tremendous amount of time to help DPW identify some of these areas. We've gone out and made some signage adjustments, some pavement marking adjustments, and continue with our clearing vegetation management efforts. Those will continue. I think with regard specifically to the bylaw request, I think for us to go forward with any kind of meaningful signage updates for the system-wide improvements, it's a matter of understanding what the law says. And I think we've talked about this. So that said, if there's ways to sign the bike paths differently that are more conducive to operation of a bike more consistently without stopping at every single intersection, we're all for that. But again, we need to make sure that it's signed according to standard uniform signage that follows the law. I think that's all we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So I think in a lot of cases we're saying a lot of the same things. And I think we all do have that same shared goal of safety. We certainly don't want to have that incident reoccur ever. So I think there's a lot to be said about maybe speaking about this, certainly before town meeting and whether or not this really warrants a bylaw.
Well, thank you very much for your input. And thank you for your time on this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Bill, thanks for the distinction on the database. Having mined a lot of these databases, trying to pull this crash data out, you're absolutely right. Incidences are a heck of a lot different than conflict crashes, which we might have like 3 in a year, maybe.
Yeah.
But incidences, on the other hand, are a lot more than
And
that.
they tell you a lot more. The incidents really tell you where you really need to make some corrections in a lot of cases. The Finkelstein thing, as tragic as it was, I think there was a lot of moving parts in there that all the signs and all the information in the world probably wouldn't have solved. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of incidents that happen every day that we could make a difference on in safety. And sometimes the difference between some of these being fatalities and some of them not is because we've got a good fire department, medical system, and hospital. So
exactly. So I don't know if there's a correction to be made on the database portion of this, other than maybe just always trying to improve the mechanics and the input of the data and maybe improve the accessibility of the information. That's a never-ending battle that's going to go on forever. As far as the passing zone, that's probably something the state should already have on bylaws.
Well, there's actually a bill in the legislature right now to make that a little clearer on the passing thing. I think, and Ian, you might know this different than me. For some reason, I think the state bill says 2 feet, but maybe it is 3 feet.
It changes based on the speed of the roadway.
Is that it? Okay.
But that is pretty much lifted from the Colorado state law.
Yeah.
And, the irony being that when I go and visit my friends out in Colorado and go biking, I feel safer than when I'm biking here. So,
well, I think, though, that state law is what we ought to be supporting rather than trying to create the law locally. That way there's no confusion.
Yeah. I might get to that point in a second, but there's also I would almost add on this about a cell phone usage. I mean, we're one of the best bicycling communities in the country based on our designation as a silver community. One of our hits is that our legislation is not really keeping up with what is safest for bicyclists and pedestrians. One is the cell phone law. We just really have a weak, driving while using your cell phone, a very weak law for that here. And that's probably something that should be added with the passing zone if that does pass, so that we could be up with the rest of the country as far as the best from a legal and enforcement standpoint, facilities and usage. As far as the right of way, if I was to edit this at all, I would strike driveways from the wording here. I think that would make it more passable. But still, there's the conflict with the right of way of bicyclists in the crosswalk itself. I don't think the crosswalk needs to have stop signs. You mentioned we need stop signs at a lot of these locations. Under state law, if there's someone in the crosswalk, that is a stop condition. So you don't need an additional signage. Just the virtue of the crosswalk itself is the stop sign. But it's different because we're interpreting it as pedestrians have the right of way versus bicyclists. And do we allow that? And can we allow that locally versus state allowing that?
I don't think you can supersede state law with a bylaw.
Yeah, and I just don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and
Well,
so I just don't know that. But
I
that
need
would
to-
be the thing to support is the state law to allow the right of way, so that we wouldn't have this confusion and we wouldn't be confusing our visitors who come here from all over the world to come to Nantucket and say, why is this rule different than everywhere else on the other side of the pond? So that's my confusion. I would edit the driveway out of this and support the passing zone. I would add a cell phone usage onto that, and the bike database seems like it's a good thought. But
I'm not sure you can do that on the cell phone. And I think there's actually something in the legislature about hands-free cell phones now, but I think you'd be preempted by the state on that.
yeah, I just know the criticisms we take when they review our report cards on how we're doing as a state and a community. So if there's not a motion here, we'll just by consensus take no action on this, and hopefully the feedback that you get from all of us is sufficient, unless there's any other comments from the members.
I had a couple of things. I also want to applaud both of your efforts for bringing this forward, as well as the work that you've been putting into starting to database and catalog these things. It's a great benefit for the whole island, as VPAC. And what I see is a very large project. Nantucket has so many bike paths and so many intersections, and we're starting here at a volunteer basis, and then we have the DPW in their overall umbrella with certain maintenance. And I'm wondering if what is possibly needed is a larger umbrella to either somehow through the GIS system, perhaps, or create another layer in a map and start to work towards creating a different database. I don't want to get confused when I say database, because I'm not referring to the accident database so much as the infrastructure database. And I think that exceeds volunteer type, work. And this isn't something for immediate, but perhaps a longer term goal is some funding for BPAC, perhaps through NPDC, to be considered for such a consultant or study in conjunction maybe with DPW, so that it's really focused on, while you have signage for where there is current signage, some of it's maybe related to the roads and not the bike paths. So I guess what I'm just sort of floating is perhaps an idea that it needs to be a little higher level because of the level of effort that it would take to create something like that, that then could be used for a template for future maintenance and cataloging the safety aspects of the bike paths, as well as the conditions. For example, we've done a lot of pavement studies and created like a pavement management index related to the roads. But what about the bike paths? And maybe through BPAC, or even the other thing I've had this in my mind for quite a while, so I'll put it out here, is where may CPC fall into that, under recreation? If that was and what if that was put forth through BPAC? So I'm just, since we're talking these kind of things, I wanted to share those ideas.
Well, thank you, Art. I think trying to get CPC involved in helping fund is a very good idea. And
We just actually completed our pavement management condition index for all the public roads. One thing that's blatantly obvious in that is the lack of bike path information. It is my intent to this year start to fold in pavement condition index into the bike paths. That said, we do maintain a GIS database of all the signs. So they're out there. We have that. And it's really about getting back to the previous discussion about uniformity. We've had lots of paths that have come online over the course of 30 years. And because of that, they've been maintained, some and some not, lines and signs. And they've been installed differently for each project. So I think the idea of going and comprehensively looking at the whole system and going back out with a re-signing protocol is what we're shooting for. But that's all predicated on what the law tells us to do and what the law says as far as safe passage and right of way.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but it wasn't the Cliff Road bike path. That was a state project, wasn't it?
Yes.
Which is why all the signs are there, because they put the signs up in conformance to the state laws.
Sometimes overly diligently so.
Well, they always put more signs up than, the roundabout on Sparks Avenue is a good example.
Yeah.
But it truly is what the state law is, and they put the signs up to that effect, and it conflicts with what people want on Nantucket, but it doesn't change the law just by taking the sign down.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's my fear is, we can't just do what we want to do without, because we may think we may be actually setting people up in some respects to get hurt or killed, thinking they're compliance with the law when in fact they're not. That's what our danger is.
Sure.
So, and I think the Cliff Road was a good example, as you mentioned it, because I remember that, like, geez, there's signs every 20 feet here.
Right.
And the same thing at Sparks Avenue intersection. It was like a Christmas tree of signs.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a state project.
So where would that be in state law, where it codifies
Under right of ways.
under right of ways?
So
Okay.
it's confusing, but it's difficult. It's because bicyclists, just like you have the right as a bicyclist to be on the roadway, and you have the same rights and privileges as a motor vehicle does. So you can be going down the road at 5 miles an hour if you want to, and there's nothing that anybody can do about that. They can, if they're in a passing zone, they can pass you. If you're not in a passing zone, they have to ride behind you. So you can't have it both ways, essentially. You can't have all full privileges on the roads and then modified privileges on a sidewalk or bikeway. Our problem is we got these hybrid shared paths that kind of create some confusion. And with that, I think is going to be a challenge as to how we address it. I think this is a really good start at wherever that went.
Oh, I thought.
Oh, you got it back. Yeah. That's a really good.
I haven't finished it yet, but thank you. We hope to have it finished in the next week and get it to Rob.
And then we'll be, regardless of what happens to the bylaw, we would be happy to work with you on a database issue of some kind.
Yeah.
Some way to fix that.
Well,
So,
thank you, sir.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
All right. If there's nothing more on this action, we'll take no action by consensus. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. Number 5, a request to extend a yellow no parking line on High Street. And we do have the homeowner here who made the request. Please tell us your name for the minutes.
Sure. My name is Denise DeBella. My husband and I live at 14 Pleasant Street, which is on the corner of Pleasant and High Street. I'm sure you all know that intersection because it's an incredibly popular cut through to get into town. So when we bought the house last April, we applied for permission to expand the driveway from 1 car to 2 car. And got that permission, expanded the driveway, but we didn't even consider the fact that the yellow line would make a difference. And what we found through the summer, it was dangerous because it's also a 1-block street. It's a 2-lane road, and we're trying to pull out from our driveway, and there are cars parked by our white picket fence, and there are cars coming in from Pleasant Street. It's a very difficult thing to do. So one request is to just bring legally the yellow line up to wherever it's legally supposed to be beyond a driveway. The other thought is it possible to put a yellow line so there's no parking close to Pleasant Street? So that when we pull up from High Street to take a left on Pleasant Street, if there's a car parked right there, we can't see beyond the car.
Okay.
So, and this is not just us, because it is a 2-lane street,
Mhm.
it's everybody.
No, this just so you know, this body has talked about this street and the parking configurations
Yes.
a couple of times.
Yes,
Um,
I'm sure.
So
It's
I'm
also a
just assuming
huge issue having it a 2-way
Basically,
street.
when next time you guys paint.
Can I ask you your feelings on the 2 spaces that are closest to Pleasant Street? On the
Well, there
The
was-
2 spaces.
yeah, there's right now no yellow line along this whole stretch. You probably
Right,
want a
so
yellow
that-
line
so
there.
that, I think there's, personally, I
Uh-huh.
think from where the pole is, right there in the corner of Pleasant and
Mhm.
High, there
Mhm.
should be a yellow line extending in somewhat, so there's a clear sight line.
Yep.
And there should also be a yellow line extending so we can get out of our driveway.
Sure.
Um,
Do you
because our
have
driveway is also directly across from that other pole on the other side of the street, so if we
Yeah.
back up straight, we'll hit the pole. So we have trouble getting out of our driveway because usually, you know, in the traffic times, there are at least 3 cars, sometimes 4 cars parked along the fence.
Mhm.
So, and we started, even though we now have a 2-car driveway, we started parking a car there just so we could prevent other cars from trying to, impede our access.
Do you have a demand to park on the street?
Oh my God. Oh,
You don't have, or do you do?
do we?
Do you have a
personally-
demand to park on the street on High Street?
We have no personal
Uh-huh.
need to park on High Street, but it is packed the entire summer.
Okay.
Totally packed. It is never.
Rob, you're
There's never
smiling. You
not
know where
a
I'm
car
going with
there.
this.
So
Yeah, no, I don't know the time frame of the driveway expansion at all, but
that was
typically,
last May.
typically when a driveway gets expanded, we do the whole discussion about if the select board need to they need to be aware that they're going to lose a parking space. I've been quite sensitive to that. It sounds like the line was never considered during that widening request and approval, but I'm curious if this had come before, because typically these driveway widenings that do a removal of a parking space in the street, there's a policy that has been discussed prior to this about a 2-for-1 or something like that off street.
Just to explain the issue, if you get a permit, you pull a permit to do this driveway work, DPW has to sign off on it. One of their criteria is, does this result in the removal of on-street parking, or does it impact
Sure.
on-street parking at all? I guess you're saying that never really.
I don't remember this specifically. I'll be honest.
Okay.
So I don't really know, but that's why I asked for time frame because
I'm assuming it was permitted. It got
It was
HDC
permitted,
review.
yes,
So short of doing that diligence and just following up to make sure that there were permits pulled, we're kind of at the situation where we've been at a number of different times, right? Art, do you have,
Shouldn't there be a yellow line anyway from the pole 15 feet in from the intersection
should be?
Yes.
Well, but that,
where the
Crosswalk.
where the sharrow is?
yeah, that's not, people don't park on that.
From the pole, right
Yeah.
up,
What's-
they
is there a
they
state
park
law for
directly
20
up to the corner.
If they cross that sidewalk,
Yes, they do.
well, then somebody needs to call us and we'll have them towed out of there because that's,
I'd have to call you almost every day in the
Wouldn't-
Ray,
summer.
what do you want to say?
Yeah, I actually went out and took measurements here. So that's a drop down ADA crosswalk there. So if you go the next angled piece of granite, you got about 10 feet, which is
Right.
probably 10, 15 feet would probably be a yellow line for sight distance. Coming up from the driveway, you got 2 feet plus the 2 feet past, so you got 4 feet. The existing parking area would be 44 feet. I measured all that, so just so you.
So basically,
Imagine
two
it
parking
going a yellow line, 'cause
spaces.
there should be a yellow line from that corner up
Right.
from our standards. There should be one going up to at least that, the other end of that angle. Because that's also
Right.
considered like a crossing.
whatever it's seen as?
They shouldn't be parked there, they do, I have seen it too. It's just, especially when there's work being done.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you do the measurements of what you had to work with
It-
afterwards.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. And just to remind this body that we do have a previous recommendation of removing parking on both sides of High Street. That hasn't been acted on by the select board. And the property owner should know that as well. This body's made a recommendation to
I'm
remove
actually-
all on-street parking.
I'm actually aware of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's a way that this could be done under existing regulations without being seen as a loss of parking. So
Well,
the question is, how many parking spaces is this considered?
wait a minute, I'm curious, confused.
Mhm.
I thought all she wanted to do was extend her yellow line to the end of her driveway.
Yes.
So why are we talking about this down here now?
Well, I brought it up because I think that as we look at this stretch, I think that should be done, just the end, because if people are parking on the ADA spot. But my thinking in the discussion is that perhaps we could have both, if you will. We could extend her line just a few feet, put this line in where it's supposed to be, and then Ray tells us it's still about 44 feet, which still leaves 2 parking spaces. So it's really just a adjustment
No.
of fixing. You know, it's that's where I was trying to get at. It's just catching up with the existing regs to put paint where maybe it was just missed before, and not an actual loss of parking spaces.
Okay, I thought you were going to make that whole thing no parking.
I would love. I mean, again, I was a support of that, but if it's that recommendation already died with
Yeah.
administration, I'm not looking to go there. Instead, I'm looking to see if there's a way to improve
Sure.
the overall situation without it being seen as a net loss.
Sure.
I'm happy
So-
to act on 2 items if we want to make it 2 motions.
Well, what about a crosswalk in there too?
I
I'm
don't-
serious. You got that?
It's there because it's an intersection. It's already there.
Yeah, but you've got ADA accesses,
I
and
understand.
that would better delineate it, and it would tell the people don't park on it.
Yeah, I'm not sure when the sidewalk improvement program is going to venture up to this neck of the woods, but they'll be addressed during that project, I would imagine. Rob?
I would say I'm comfortable with the request. I think it makes sense that while we're there, refreshing lines to add new if we needed to, which seems appropriate to the intersection. I think in my opinion, we're not removing parking per se, but I would still, before the lines go down, I would want to push this one forward to the Board of Selectmen so that they, A, are aware of it, B, do sign off on it, recognizing that we are putting new lines down there so that when they do get calls, it's not this committee once again removing someone's sacred parking.
Mhm.
that especially if it's already been determined that they have entertained a full-on parking ban and not approved it.
I don't think they considered it, did they? Did the selectmen consider it?
I don't think it ever
No,
went
I
to
think
the
it's
board.
with
No?
administration.
Okay. So yeah, it's just like all of these. None of them are super cut and dry. Maybe it's best that we entertain simply the request before us, as the chief tried to pull us back to, and we simply talk about extending the yellow line, and we can have a separate discussion with town admin about doing any other lines.
I think that'd be the safest way. Most likely to ensure. I mean, in my opinion, I think this was already permitted. I don't even think this is a select board action on this. This is just
I agree with that.
DPW
You
going
can't park
out
there
and,
anyway.
and
You really can't.
putting the line down.
Yeah, I
Except
mean,
if they do.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I know, but that's because there's no line.
I know,
So,
I know.
but
I'd make a motion that we extend the yellow line to the end of the curbstone on the sidewalk.
okay. Could I add a clarification of 4 feet?
that's what our standard is, right? Yeah.
Yeah, in order to get, was it 2 feet past the?
Yeah.
In order to get there, you already have to extend it 2 feet to get
Yeah.
close to the 4 feet.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Any opposed? No. It's unanimous.
Quick question, where's
Go ahead.
the yellow line being extended to?
South of the driveway, 2 feet and like, where's that
4
picture
feet.
at? 4 feet, excuse me. Extended 4 feet south of the driveway.
And is there a way that we can try to address from Pleasant Street, the other part of the yellow line? Or,
From the intersection?
yeah,
Sure. And not to make it too tedious for you, but I assure that I'd be following up on any requests that you would like to follow through with. If you want to send a letter to the town
okay,
manager
okay,
specific to that, you could even mention this most recent approval,
okay,
and I'd be happy to continue the conversation with
Okay.
her on that.
great. Thank you all very much. I
Sure.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Item number 6, follow up on a request of street lighting on west end of Westchester Street.
Where's Bob Champion?
Yes, some of you may remember this group took up this issue some time ago. There's a wealth of material on the issue in the packet. The way it was left was that there would be vegetation cut on the shoulders of Westchester Street, and there would be ongoing review of the lighting conditions and determination of the safety of the roadway and need for lighting. I don't think that we've ever followed up on determining if lighting was necessary for safety along the roadway. So that's why this item is on the agenda.
Well, doesn't it appear, looking at the emails, that there's some for and some against?
That's saying it nicely, yes. And I did sketch up a map of utility poles in the area that we can just use for reference. I've numbered each one of the utility poles based on what National Grid uses. So we can, where's the mouse in this? We can actually, I believe between Old Westmore Farm and Pilgrim Road is the stretch we're looking at. Just by taking a ride down, it seemed like pole 28 and perhaps 30 were candidate poles for lighting if we were to add those.
So I think I would start by saying, while I was not represented here last time, Chuck was here, Chuck Larson, on DPW's behalf. I think the same message applies now as it did then, which is there was certainly noted vegetation crowding that stretch of roadway. It has been substantially improved, which allows for people to traverse the edge of the road and even the shoulder of the road, where before you were crowded really into the road there. Introduction of street lighting is quite a sensitive subject to particularly folks that were here earlier tonight, the MMA. I remember last time there was quite a package of information sent forward by Mr. David Gagnon about the dark sky initiatives and the hope that really no new street lighting would be added here or virtually anywhere on island to try to keep that dark sky that we have. So I think for a lot of those reasons, it really comes down to it's a right-of-way vegetation management maintenance issue. We will continue to keep those corridors open now that they have been opened. And I would say that, as I've said to most folks and even the bicycle community, lighting at night should not be relied upon to be a street light. If you're out for a walk, whether you're taking your dog out or sending your grandkids out on bikes, they should be going out with personal lights for safety. And the nice thing about that is it's used specifically for that one time and then can be reused over and over again. And it's not a light that stays on perpetually when not needed.
Understood. And just looking at the corridor, I mean, their overhead street lamps are usually provided at intersecting roadways, major intersecting roadways, and at least that's done for Westchester at Crooked. There's one light on pole 12, and then over at Pilgrim Road on pole 24. I think that the request here was some mid-block lighting, which would be above the minimum accommodation. Art, did you have anything to add?
I agree with the vegetation management.
Okay.
I'm happy to see it was done from our initial discussion a couple of years ago.
Okay. Is there a motion from the committee at all on this item? Seems like we're going to, by consensus, take no action on this request. And by action, I don't mean continuing maintenance of the vegetation. I'm assuming that's going to go on as it's already been occurring.
Well, I'm wondering if action needs to be taken. And that, by that, I mean a letter. It seems that in his request, the proponent is looking for a study that was promised back in 2017, or that they would, quote, study the issue, this committee. So I guess my point would be, rather than simply a vote to take no action, maybe it's a vote to draft a letter that specifically states the position of the committee. I'm just throwing it out there, if you think that's necessary or not, if it's been done in the past.
Okay. Well, we'll take that under advisement, I suppose. We can, in the meantime, communicate that there was no action based on this, and I'm assuming we all were diligent about taking a look at the corridor in the evening time and seeing whether the conditions were safe or not. Next item on the agenda is other business. Is there anything that's not on the agenda that you'd like to discuss?
I would simply that this crosswalk discussion has prompted me to take a little bit more research into what other towns are doing for policies and design guidelines specific to crosswalks. But I think there's other opportunities that would, starting with the crosswalk policy and design guidelines, would be really helpful for the committee moving forward. I would strongly encourage at least discussion about whether the committee is interested in doing that for the town here. And secondly, what other similar type of policies or design guidelines would the committee feel through its history here would make sense with, depending on the frequency of things that are coming before the committee, that would make sense for the town to develop so that people would know. And I would say come before us better prepared to ask for something. And we would be better prepared by having that package together to render a decision that would be consistent.
Okay. No, I think the yellow line guidelines are extremely helpful. I mean, that provides guidance for yellow lines at driveways and intersections. So I think you're looking for something similar with crossings. I think the frustration with a lot of crosswalks is they don't have accessible landings on either end in a lot of locations that we approve. And that's just a conflict with being a rural community without sidewalks on both sides of the street and on many of our roadways. So point's taken. Art, do you have anything to contribute at all to that?
No, I would agree and support policies. I think that they're helpful. The other couple things that I think have repeatedly come up over the years are, of course, speed limits, which I think is certainly with the more recent legislation, maybe address that. So I don't know that
We're getting
need a policy, but and then no parking in the yellow lines. I think we have it, but sure, a crosswalk policy. I mean, it almost be part of transportation planning documents, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Signage, distances,
Mm-hmm.
sort of like our speed hump
Yeah.
policy.
Alrighty. There's no other business. Moving on to approval of minutes. Any changes at all to those minutes? If not, we'll accept those. And adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Favor say aye, and we'll adjourn at 12:02.